the short answer is it's not easy, and a book deal is not going to be something that is handed to you, and it's
Right.
going to take you doing the work on the manuscript and that heavy, deep work of writing, but it's also going to take you saying, look, I'm going to walk the walk and be an author even before I get a book deal. And that means being active in conversations on social media. It means following what's happening in the book world. Just, read the New York Times book section. Just pay attention to what's happening, and because you are a part of it.
What does it take to put your life's work out there in a really big way? How much can I do with this one precious life? Welcome to The Selfish Gift.
Don't you just wish you could get in a room with an experienced, serious, seasoned editor and pick their brains? Today, you've got the chance to do exactly that. I'm here with Hilary Swanson. She's here to give us the inside scoop on what big traditional publishing houses look for in an author. And she should know, until about a year ago, Hilary was a senior editor for Harper One, an imprint of HarperCollins, where she acquired and edited multiple New York Times bestsellers and national bestsellers. She's edited memoirs from Queer Eye's Jonathan Van Ness, actress Rose McGowan, the journalist Sunny Hostin, and the comedic team behind I'm Mom So Hard. I love those two. Now Hilary is an independent ghostwriter, an editor, and a writing coach. She works with authors to bring their books to life. She lives in the Bay Area, and she also runs a workshop called How the Fuck Do I Get a Book Deal? With best-selling author John Kim. Hilary, thank you so much for joining me on The Selfish Gift.
Thank you for having me. I'm so looking forward to this.
Me too. Okay, so let's start with the basics. For those who don't know all the inside lingo, what is a senior editor, and what does it mean to acquire a book?
Yes. So, at dinner parties, or when dinner parties used to be a thing, and I would say I was an editor, I think a lot of people just imagine me sitting in a big comfy armchair and just poring over manuscripts, just reading and editing all day. And unfortunately, that's not the case. What an editor does is more similar to what a producer in film would be doing. So they're managing the entire process from start to finish. So acquiring or the acquisition stage, that involves reaching out or getting proposals from agents and deciding which books you want to sign on, having those meetings with authors when you're in competition with other publishers, trying to, get the deal. And then the deal itself, the contract, the terms, all of that negotiation is something that the editor is doing, along with, the publisher's legal team and various sales team members. Then it's the hard work of taking it from a concept or a proposal and getting it to, 65, 75, 85,000 words. And I'm speaking, I'm coming from the nonfiction world, so I should have that disclaimer up front. And then meanwhile, you're not just having your blinders on and working on the manuscript, you're also thinking about things like the cover design, or even long term, you're thinking about how you're going to promote the book. You are coordinating with the audio team to make sure that they have what they need. You're talking to the sales team who's going out and pitching the book to various accounts like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and indie bookstores. And then you are also, taking that book into the world when it's ready. And along the way, you're acting as a therapist, life coach, and moral support for an author who, whether it is somebody who doesn't have a public persona or it's a huge time celebrity. If it's your first book, there are nerves and there are freak out moments. And I think it's a crucial part of the job that is really important, is taking care of the person behind the book all the way.
Wow, that is a huge slate of responsibilities. So yeah, that's a pretty powerful position, right? As a senior editor in a traditional trade publishing house, you're not just making the book. You're the gatekeeper. You're the person to you're the person who makes the decisions. You're the person that would-be authors need to get in front of and persuade of their value, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
You're really the middleman between all parties involved. And, I always say when I'm working with an author, I'm the advocate for the reader. I might point out their blind spots, but then when I'm working within a publisher, I'm the advocate for the author, and I'm the person who is the author's voice and the author's representation when there are decisions being made on the publisher's side about things like marketing or book package.
Right. So when you were at Harper One, what would you look for in a new author or in a new project? What makes a book or an author appealing and demonstrates promise?
It is one of those hard things to put into words, because there is just that special feeling that.
Are you going to say the it factor?
You could call it the secret ingredient, whatever you want to call it, but it is kind of a hard thing. I mean, it's like in dating. It's not, how can you kind of really put into words what makes you choose to, embark on a relationship with somebody? Because that's really what publishing is. It's a multiple month, typically multiple year partnership where you're, sharing a lot. So as an editor, beyond things like obvious, the platform and the message, there are also the considerations of like, do I want to fight for this book? Do I want to, spend several years of my life working on this and
with this person?
And with this person. Right. Yeah, truly.
But you know what you said, the obvious things, platform, message. I mean, that's not something that everybody, who's listening to this podcast would know, like what your considerations would be. Can you put a few, guardrails around that? Like, how big does a platform need to be? What do you literally look for? What constitutes like, oh, that's a great package, and this one has weaknesses and deficiencies?
Yeah, sure. And, again, I will not make disclaimers for every answer, but I do also want to just reiterate that I'm coming from a big 5 publisher in the nonfiction world where we did have certain standards. And I think that you should, I can get more into kind of the various, like the spectrum of what platform means and what you need. From where I was coming from, we had certain expectations that, if I had to put a figure on it, like that authors would have somewhere in the range of like 10,000 followers as like a starting point.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course it ranges. I mean, it could go up to millions upon millions. There were other books where platform wasn't as much of an issue, where it was more of a publicity driven book. If it was something that we knew was, very revelatory and was going to get headlines, then it wasn't as important that an author have, that strong following.
Basically, there has to be something that's going to get the book in front of the eyeballs of lots and lots and lots of potential readers who are the type of people who might be interested in buying it. Whether that route is going to come through their own network and social channels, or whether it's going to come through mainstream media.
Yes, exactly.
Got it.
And even when looking at, a traditionally social media driven platform, there are people that might have 3 million followers, but we would not consider it a good platform because they're not book buyers or they're not
Interesting.
engaged, right? So I've turned down plenty of proposals from people who had millions of followers because
Wow.
I saw that they had individual followers, but I didn't see that they had a community behind them.
Interesting. So would you say that a small but really engaged community is worth more than a big, huge platform? Like yeah, sorry.
Yes, 100%. So I could get a proposal from a pop star who also does like fun, silly videos on TikTok, but not really see a book there. But I could also get a proposal from a mom who has a blog with a following of 2,000, but there are hundreds of comments on everything she writes. There are women who have traveled to see her speak. There are people who have gotten tattoos of lines that she said. Those are the things, honestly, that hold far more weight than just a huge platform.
Oh, that's so fascinating and so good to hear. I know that a lot of people will be encouraged to hear that, and maybe some will be discouraged. But
right.
Let me ask you about going into message. Your specialism is in feminism, memoir, self-help, and humor. What can you tell me about why those topics are so important to you?
Well, selfishly, when I am looking for books that I want to work on, it's books that I want to read, right? It's books that I want on my own bookshelf. So those topics are, the books that I really enjoy: feminism and memoir and humor and self-help that's saying something new, which is difficult in
there's a lot of recycling of messages.
Yes, exactly. I say specifically with self-help, it's like there's nothing new under the sun, but there's people who say it in a new way, and that's all you can really ask for. But I just find that, especially with nonfiction, and especially nowadays, people aren't reading passively. They're making a selection about what they're going to read and what they're going to spend their time on, and expecting it to have a ripple effect, for it to not just be this one-off where, I escaped into this novel and I, had time to kill on a plane. Like, no, they are getting something from this book. And what I really hoped to do with all of the books I worked on was amplify the message of, whichever author I was working with, and have it go forth and do something good in the world. So whether it was, an underrepresented voice in the case of, feminism or disability or, BIPOC voices, whatever it might be, it's, people who deserve to be heard from, saying things that haven't been said over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I really believe that, we can't all be fighting on the front lines of things. But reading can be an act of activism. And so it made me really passionate about making sure that my list was doing what it could do to kick down doors.
Oh my God, I love that so much. What you're describing, I often talk about purposeful publishing, and that is what we do here at Wonderwell. And this is about creating material that we believe will make the world a better place. And it's just, that's such an old trope, but it's true. We want to have a positive impact. But what you just said about reading being an act of activism, I mean, that's purposeful reading, right? That's what you're saying, I think, is that readers are reading purposefully, just as authors and publishers, some of them, are publishing purposefully. And that's where that really comes together. That's amazing. So can you tell us about, you worked with you worked with the founder of Pussy Riot, right?
I did.
And a couple of other like pretty exciting, dynamic, impactful people. Can you tell us a little bit more about the activist books you've worked on? And
Sure, yes. So using Pussy Riot as one example, Nadia Tolokonkova is one of the founding members of Pussy Riot, who, it's kind of a band, activist, artist collective who got international acclaim when they played a protest song in a Russian church in protest of Putin. This was years and years and years ago. And they have since, continued to perform kind of revolutionary stunts and very cool, just forms of pushing back against totalitarianism and just, kind of Putin and all he represents, right? Mm-hmm. And so working with her on the book, which was, talk about reading as an act of activism, the book is called Read and Riot, and it is a collection of the things that have inspired her, the philosophers who she learned from and kind of took morsels in, the creation of what would become Pussy Riot. And so it's a really unique book. When she visited San Francisco, I was also asked to help her at one of her shows. There was a moment where they needed the stage to be rushed by a mob of people in the ski masks that the Pussy Riot members wear. And so I and my colleagues went to the show and hung out backstage. And then when we heard the, code word, we were able to rush the stage and just dance and riot and act a fool. And
oh my God, I love that. Okay, so when I think about a book editor, that is not the picture that comes to mind. Is she is a stage rushing pussy rioter.
Exactly. Yes. My assistant at the time was like, this is beyond what I thought I was going to be doing as an editorial assistant as well.
In corporate publishing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the great thing about being an editor is that you make the list that you work on what you want it to be. So even though I was working for a huge corporation, mm-hmm. I was still working on subversive books and being able to do things like rush the stage at a Pussy Riot concert.
That's so amazing. So, in that respect, this is a layer of creativity that I think most people don't understand or aren't familiar with. A layer to the editor's job that is creative, and so it's not just about working on the manuscript. It's about shaping the list and imagining the book, and kind of, I suppose, creating that contribution to the public conversation in a kind of behind the scenes way.
Yeah.
It sounds, it sounds exciting. I know I do it too.
Right.
It's so wonderful to talk with you about that and to hear your experiences with these books. But acquiring the titles, of course, is only half the job. And then once you've signed them and they're on your list, what kinds of hands-on work would you typically do with one of your authors? And also tell me what, if anything, would you not do?
Mm-hmm. So I am a very hands-on editor and I really enjoy the act of editing. So, I like I said earlier in our conversation, my job is not to just sit in a comfy chair and read a manuscript, but
although who doesn't love a comfy chair?
If only, right? I'm not mad at that part of the job. So I love to get in there, and I would essentially, from the point of acquisition and having a contract with this person, would have multiple conversations and get them going. And set these kind of mini deadlines so that it wasn't about them going off into a cave and writing their book. And then the delivery date comes and they plop it on my doorstep and then I just do what I want with it and we get it out the door to the printer. No, it was about it being a conversation where they send me a chunk and I tell them what's working, what might not be working, and then they go and they implement and they get back to me with more, and we go back and forth so that by the time the delivery date comes, it's almost like just a celebration of whew, we did it, rather than this, really weighted deadline.
So would you be working with them from the outlining stage, and then also it sounds like coaching them while they write? It's not just about revising.
Correct. That's for me. That's because that's the way that I like to work. But I should say that in publishing, that is not the case.
Yeah, I was going to say I have heard very different stories. I have heard authors say, I submitted my manuscript to my publisher for the so-called substantive edit, and what I got back was like 3 tiny notes, or a note that's really vague, such as make this more compelling, or, that sort of really helpful direction. So and obviously you've worked on some really high profile books with some really high profile people, and you were in a senior position. What can you help us to kind of like level set and understand what the range of normal looks like inside a traditional publishing house?
I think it also needs to be said that what normal looks like in the last 2 years has changed a lot, because there is an overwhelm that has only gotten worse when it comes to editors and the workload that they have. And
interesting.
So it might not be the case that, they don't want to do as much of an edit as they normally would. It's that they have 12 books that they're working on. So I think what I understand of what authors are typically getting out of their edit is, as you said, not much of an edit, which is why that proposal and why that, early material is so important, and making sure that what you sell to the editor and the publisher is representative of what you're going to deliver, because there might not be that back and forth.
Yeah.
So, I think it really varies. And that's the reason why a lot of people are working with outside editors.
Yeah.
And, they got their book deal and they want to make sure that at the end of the day, they're getting enough eyes on this manuscript and they're having someone to really dig in and ask all those questions. So,
So what you're saying is that a lot of authors, even if they have a traditional publishing contract, they've been assigned to an editor there, they might actually wind up employing their own freelance editor outside of that relationship, so that the manuscript that they hand in is finished and in good shape. And you talked about the proposal and the importance of it. So book proposal is so critical, and so it's so much more complex than just filling in the gaps in a template, sort of saying description goes here, marketing goes here. And I know that now that you have left your corporate publishing job and you're out as an independent, helping people to shape their book proposal so that it meets those expectations of whatever house they're submitting to. That's something that you do for your clients, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah. So what goes into shaping a proposal, writing a proposal? I mean, you're basically building a book from the ground up, the concept and its components, et cetera. Tell me about how you make that happen.
It's about stepping back from the content of your book and looking at it more in terms of the concept, and then creating more of a business plan about your book. You're essentially asking for a publisher who can be seen as like a VC, trying to figure out where they're going to invest, and making your case. So a book proposal is not about showing off what a great writer you are necessarily. I mean, it definitely needs to have voice, and it needs to be engaging, and it needs to catch the agent or the publisher's attention. But it really is about saying, hey, this is a book that's filling a gap in the marketplace, and there is a hungry audience for it. And this is who this person is that's going to read this book. And this is why the timing is right for this book. And just really addressing the larger picture of what's going on in the world and what's going on in the publishing industry that makes this book the answer that people are looking for.
I love that you likened it to basically pitching a VC, because you're basically, if you're hoping to get a traditional publishing deal as a new author, what you're basically saying is, will you invest your capital in my project? And here is why it's a good investment for you to make.
Exactly. And because at the end of the day, they are not just there to fulfill your dreams of becoming an author. Right. They're there to get a return on their investment. And so the book proposal is there to make the case for why they would get a return on investment and why they should choose your book over the hundreds of proposals that might be coming in that very week.
And that's not an easy thing for a new author to know how to do. I mean, I'm thinking about like putting myself in the shoes of like, okay, I'm a life coach and I have this methodology and I know what I want to write about, but I have no idea how to, do this in a way that will make sense to a publisher. And I don't even know how to gauge, the market, for this book, et cetera, et cetera. So many authors hire help to put their book proposal together. And that's something that you do as well.
It's something I do on a one-on-one basis with freelance, as a freelancer. And I also started a workshop with one of my former authors at Harper One, John Kim, who has a huge social media presence as the quote unquote angry therapist, which is not indicative of who he is. I've never seen him get angry in the years that I've known him. But it's his way of saying I'm relatable, I'm a human.
Tell me about the workshop. It's got a super fun name for one thing. Wow.
Yes, it's called How the Fuck Do I Get a Book Deal? Because it's in the vein of, books these days and this, hopefully I can swear because on this podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This is okay. We're in a bubble. Yeah.
Then I'll just keep it going and say, people want no bullshit these days. And John and I decided that we would pull back the curtain, me from the publishing side and John from somebody who is an author who's now gone through this several times and gone from an author who had that, 10,000 followers maybe and wasn't known very well and now has, 300,000 followers and several best-selling books and TV deals and all of these various things going. So he can really talk about how he went from, just this concept and this small brand and built it into, now almost like a franchise of some kind.
And a lot of people are wanting to do that with their body of knowledge, with their own personal brand. So, okay, just if you can summarize it, how the fuck do I get a book deal?
So I think that it's really intimidating, right? And publishing is a very murky business. Everybody knows of the industry, but they don't know how these decisions get made.
Right.
And they don't know what goes into it. They don't know what's normal and what to expect. And I think while, yes, you can invest in help from a freelancer, you can take a workshop, and I highly recommend those because that is what I'm here for. The first thing you need to do is just be an active member of the publishing industry. And that's simple. It's read books in your category. It's knowing what else is out there is going to help you create a better book proposal that will be able to speak to what's going on and why your book is different and kind of speak the language of publishers, because a lot of people, they get so locked into what their message is in their book that they forget to place it within the larger context of what's going on in publishing. And the thing is that it's not actually good to say, but my book is different than everything that's out there, because publishers don't know what to do with that. They need to know how they're going to sell it, where on the bookshelf your book is going to live. And so the best thing you can say is, look, there's this thing happening where, books about
autism
are really having a surge in interest. And there's books that address getting diagnosed later in life. There's books about how to parent, but there's nothing about women who are autistic, for example.
Right.
And so it's fitting yourself into the area. And I just want to, walk it all the way back to say, yes, it is difficult to break into the publishing industry, and you are going to need to invest in yourself, but it also is as simple as knowing what else is out there.
Right. That's something that you can't just throw money at. You're not, so it sounds like that bigger picture contextual awareness is as important, or maybe more important, than adhering to the form of the book proposal and knowing exactly what words to use.
I think so. I think it's the foundation, but then you need to have the nuts and bolts of, here's the overview, and here's what I have going on platform wise and all of those things. So the short answer is, it's not easy, and a book deal is not going to be something that is handed to you. And it's going to take you doing the work on the manuscript and that heavy, deep work of writing. But it's also going to take you saying, look, I'm going to walk the walk and be an author even before I get a book deal. And that means being active in conversations on social media. It means following what's happening in the book world. Just, read the New York Times book section, just pay attention to what's happening. And because you are a part of it. Even as readers, you're a part of the publishing industry. So be active.
That's such a refreshing and cool way to look at it. Yeah, we're not just isolated when we're reading a book. We're actually, consuming and taking in the words of ideas of someone else and understanding what else is being said on that topic.
Yeah.
Let me shift gears for a minute, Hilary, because there's another aspect to your work, which I know a lot of people are going to be interested to learn more about how it works and what you do. And that is ghostwriting. Now that you have left your day job at the Big Five traditional publisher, you're working as an independent editor, you're doing this workshop, and you're also ghostwriting. Tell me how the ghostwriting process works and who needs a ghostwriter?
Yes. So I will start with just a short story or anecdote. My partner was telling somebody at his work that I was a ghostwriter, and they thought that I write spooky stories. And I just love that is what they assumed. So ghostwriting is essentially, it's typically you're working with somebody who, the question of them getting a book deal is, it's not really a gamble. It's usually somebody who is very well known and acclaimed in their own right, but they are not a professional writer. This might be their first book. And the publisher wants a guarantee that they're going to have help and insight to make sure that the book is as good as it can be, and that it delivers, and that it's, because at the end of the day, writing a book is an extremely hard thing to do. And if you bring a ghostwriter in, it's actually going to deliver a better reading experience for everybody, right? So I will, have conversations with the person I'm working with, and get, as nitty gritty and as personal as we can get. And then I will go off and, play with it and put something on the page. And then, similar to the editing process, it's just a back and forth, and it's just making sure that we are serving the author and getting their voice right on the page and making sure that it's authentic, while also serving the reader and not having it just be this transcript of somebody spilling their life story or the work that they do, or, the concept behind their book.
The book is good. Well, so what I'm hearing you say is that the clients that you are doing ghostwriting projects for are pretty high level people. And so they're famous, they're big platforms. Obviously you can't say who they are, and that's totally fine. But what I come across a lot of people who are not celebrities and, but are struggling to get their books out. They're not a professional writer. They're a specialist in some other topic area. Should a business consultant hire a ghostwriter? If so, what should they expect to pay? And what do they, is that a good idea?
It is, if your goal is to get published by a major publisher, and if your book is an extension of your brand, and having a book is going to also amplify all the other parts of what you have going on. And if you have the money, which I will just be very frank about what it will cost, a full ghostwrite, which is, you are literally having someone either take your words and the other content that you've put out into the world and form a book out of it, or maybe it's more of like a collaboration between the two of you. It can range from, I would say, $25,000 on the very, very, very low end to 100,000 plus. And so that's a huge investment, but for some people it makes sense. That said, you can also have somebody do a developmental edit on your manuscript that you've been working on for a couple thousand, right? And again, it depends. If you hire somebody with a huge amount of experience, they have been working in this field for 10 years, they've edited multiple New York Times bestsellers, you're going to pay more than if you hire somebody who maybe doesn't have quite as much experience. But it's not to say you're not going to get good work. It's just there's definitely a sliding scale that can vary a lot.
It's a big investment either way. Yeah.
Other people just need more of a book coach, which is also, something that I do for certain people. So they go off and write the book, but they need help with the concepting. They need to sit down with somebody and come up with the overall structure, and then perhaps a template that they can use as they go forth and write all the chapters, so that they know what they're saying and where everything needs to go. And there's a wide range of bringing in somebody. And the thing that I think is so important to keep in mind is that you don't have to do it alone. There are so many resources, and they're not all at the very top end of the spectrum. It's like we hire, we do therapy online now, and it's very accessible and it's very easy. And the same thing can be said for getting help with your book. There's so much out there.
I think it can be really challenging for people who are new to that craft, and they don't, they're busy with their jobs, they're busy with their careers. They don't necessarily want to become an expert in how the publishing industry works or know all of these terms. So hiring, really even being able to evaluate a freelancer and to determine whether or not they have what it takes to get you where you need to go can be super, super challenging. So I think, what kinds of things should nonfiction author or an aspiring nonfiction author look for when they are hiring help with their book, when there's such a huge range of fees and services out there?
I think they should look at the other books that the person has worked on, look at their website, and see if they have worked on books that you either know of or that sit closely aligned with your book and what you're writing about. And then I think the editor or ghostwriter or book coach or consultant should just be very transparent in what their fees are. I mean, for me personally, it's a really hard thing because you are essentially estimating what you think, right? Like it's not a service in which it's clear cut. This is going to take me 3 hours and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You don't know necessarily what the work is going to entail. So it's always this estimate, which is a gamble on both parties' ends, right?
Right.
And I think most people will either give you an hourly rate or they will give you a flat fee estimate. And you can always ask, actually, what would your flat fee be? Or if they give you a flat fee, you can reverse it and say, would you be open to doing this on an hourly basis? And just knowing that the hourly rate can be anywhere from $50 an hour to $200 plus an hour. I always like to give out numbers as much as I can because there isn't anything out there that people can say like, is this normal? The great thing is
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no! Once you have a publisher or an agent, I mean, you do have somebody who can guide you in that way of like, is this normal and what is the standard? But it's really hard when you're just doing it.
Most
alone.
People don't. They don't have a publisher or an agent, or they need this help even to get that publisher or agent. So all of this advice you're sharing is super helpful. And an hourly rate of over $200 for editing. I know it's eye popping, but being a publisher myself, I know that is true, and that is the going rate for serious professional freelancers with deep trade experience. So, okay, let's shift gears again for a minute. I want to talk to you about your writing practice, basically, because here you are, even though you are a professional who has built most of your career kind of like behind the curtain. You are a writer. It may not be your name on the book, but you have written tons of books. So tell me about your own kind of creative process. How the heck do you do that?
It was intimidating going from an editor to a ghostwriter, and even now writing things under my own name for the first time. And I think,
sorry if I can interrupt, especially because the books that you're ghostwriting, that they're for celebrities, and there's a high expectation that this book is going to be a New York Times bestseller. So, well, that's a lot of pressure, right? So to sit down and go, okay, bring the magic, baby.
Exactly.
How do you get yourself in that zone?
Write a book that's going to sell 1 million copies. The great thing is you're never really starting with a blank page. You do have conversations, you do have hopefully a great concept, and you have a lot that they've probably already put out into the world. So you're consuming everything you can. You're listening to every podcast that they've ever done. You're stalking their Instagram. You're living in their world. And so then it's just a matter of getting going and getting something on the page and then shaping it. And what I thought was a disadvantage, which was the fact that I wasn't doing the work of a writer for the last, 10 years. I was an editor. I thought there was a bit of imposter syndrome there, saying like, who am I to now just go and write books as a ghostwriter? But what I found was it's actually much easier for me because I have a decade of experience of writing in other people's voices for so long that meanwhile there are ghostwriters who come from more of a journalism background or a more traditional writing background that have a lot harder of a time because they spent the last 10, 20 years refining their voice, and it's very hard for them to shift gears. Whereas for me, that's just the way I work. I listen to people and I can then translate that to the page with their, mannerisms and their sense of humor. I can channel that. Whereas somebody who does have more experience, straight up writing, it's more of a challenge. So I actually feel very comfortable and confident now, and I can have a lot of fun with it. And it's just really nice. There was, like I said, there was this aspect as an editor at a big traditional publisher of, you have your hands in every single pot. You are working on a profit and loss statement. You're working on, the budget. You're working on a presentation to the sales team. You're scheduling a photo shoot. Now I have such a small slice of that pie, but I get to go off and sit and put on my music and just write and figure out and play with words on the page. And my mental clutter is so much less messy and it's a lot more focused. So, there's pros and cons. I loved all that other, I loved all of that other stuff. And I could nerd out on what the spine of a book is going to look like. But there is also something very nice about having that focus.
So now that you are spending so much more time in the sort of the writer's chair in service of an author whose name will go in the book, what advice would you give to folks who are listening who are struggling to get their own manuscript out? What writerly advice can you share?
Well, first of all, don't stay in a chair. You might need to switch up your physical location to switch up your frame of mind. Something that I have learned, especially working in a pandemic, being a mom, is that you kind of got to get in where you fit in. And sometimes that means that, for me, as an example, I only work at a desk when I'm working on kind of administrative things. When I'm being creative, I need to be sitting somewhere soft with my feet up and not staring at a wall. I have a house that has an upstairs and downstairs, and there's my upstairs brain, where I'm answering emails, and there's my downstairs brain where I'm, actually just being more creative. So I think you need to experiment with things. And sometimes a case of writer's block is a matter of literally getting up and placing yourself somewhere else and figuring out what works for you. In terms of other writerly advice, I would say that, oftentimes I say the best thing you can do, especially if you're writing a nonfiction book, is stop writing your book. And it's to invest in learning about the book proposal. It is, take a workshop, learn from somebody, figure that out. Because, practically speaking, a publisher isn't going to just buy a book or acquire a book based on you plopping a 70,000 word manuscript on their door. No one has the time to read that. So stop what you're doing. Don't write the book anymore. Write a really great proposal, because not only is that just how it's going to work acquisitions wise, but writing that proposal is actually going to make the future manuscript much better, because writing that proposal is going to force you to ask these questions about the positioning of the book and the, who, what, where, why, how. And then when you come back to that manuscript, you are so much more focused on like the big picture, the necessity of your book. So that's something I say, stop writing. And then I would also just say, I know I'm talking about, getting help and taking workshops or hiring a consultant, but there is a fine line between that and over preparation and specifically over researching and continuing to noodle and tweak, and to the point where you never actually just get it out. So you just need to figure out, what am I going to invest in myself, and what's the best way to invest that, and target it and know it and do it, but don't let it keep you from, at the end of the day, getting the book into the hands of someone who's going to get it into the world.
Excuse me. That is really good advice, and I'm sure it can be a really difficult line to walk, between, well, am I over researching or am I under prepared? So at some point, an author is going to have to sit down and get their words out. Maybe they are, working with a hybrid publisher, or they are planning to self-publish, or they have their traditional book deal and they don't have a Hilary because, to kind of nurture and coach them through it. So they're trying to get the words out by themselves. What can you offer us in terms of advice around process? Should people do you believe in detailed outlines, or should you just sort of sit down and let it flow when the inspiration strikes? What can you say to help us get the words onto the page?
All I can say is what works for me, and what works for me might not work for others. I know for myself personally, it's too much for me to think I'm going to sit down and write today. Because there's this, there's too much pressure around that word, right? And I can tend to feel like I need to be in the mood to write. I need to feel creative. I need to have the exact amount of sleep and coffee and inspiration, and I will never be in the mood to write. So what you have to do is flip that mindset. And for me, what I say is, I'm going to put things in the right place. Because like I said, you're never working with a blank page. Even if you just have 5 words on a page, that can help you. You start figuring out where things are going to go, and you might add a sentence. And for me, it's all about just if I tell myself I'm going to sit down and just do one sentence, that can then get me going. And that one sentence can lead to a paragraph, and I'm kind of moving stuff around. One thing that I do, especially, working on nonfiction projects, and especially if you're working on something that isn't necessarily like a linear story, but more of topical chapters, I use a program called Scrivener, which essentially is like a software version of somebody writing Post-it notes and putting them on the wall and being able to rearrange the Post-it notes, and then, kind of jump around in the manuscript while keeping things contained in their separate buckets. So I really find Scrivener to be helpful for me, because I can even just look at it and say, like, where do I want to go today? I want to write a little bit on this chapter. And then, you know what, I'm going to go back to this other one. And there's a lot of placeholders. There's a lot of, in publishing, you put TK for, to stand for to come. I don't know the origin of that.
I don't know either. They do it in journalism too. And TK is like, okay, first of all, you guys are publishing experts. You should know that the word come doesn't start with a K. What?
Right. And so I
don't know. Yeah.
I don't know the story behind that, but there is a lot of TK in my, in my early manuscripts, and that's fine, because the thing you don't want to do is force yourself to sit down and write chapter 2 because you just wrote chapter 1. No,
interesting.
Nobody says you have to do that. So jump around, and then when you have things kind of all filled in, then I take it into like its own Word doc and have it
interesting.
be. Yeah.
Okay. And now, Hilary, you had 2 specific pieces of advice specifically for authors who are writing memoir. Can you just quickly share with me what those 2 pieces of advice are for memoir writers?
Yes. And I'm telling you this as someone who has worked on hundreds of books, and specifically mostly memoir and the trials and tribulations that come with that. The first one is, do not have your family read it until it goes off to the printer. I just find, and that's my cutthroat rule. Obviously, there are some cases where, you want to have your mom read it because you need her to kind of fact check some things, or it is really important for you to have your sister read it. But in general, just know that this is your story. You're not telling their story out of bounds. You're telling your story, which you are entitled to do. And the more you bring their perspective into it, the more you let all of the anxiety of them reading and getting upset come into it, the less you're serving the reader. And the whole point of sharing your story is to help others feel seen. So you just don't want to dilute it. You have to kind of know that, all right, I'm biting the bullet and I'm going to tell this, and my family is going to have thoughts and opinions on it because they all do. And I just have to do what's in service of the book, and thus the readers, and thus the world that's going to benefit from this.
Right.
So I just think that I have seen a lot of people share the book with their family, not based on any rule that tells you have to do that, but just this feeling of like, well, I probably should. And that ends up changing the book. It also prolongs the process. It always takes it into a much lengthier and much more complicated.
Because do you find that they invariably have issues and they want things to be changed that may not actually serve the quality of the reading experience that the book provides?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, it takes it from something pure to something that has been photoshopped.
It's like designed by committee, right? It's like trying to do everything by committee. It's just like, it's going to be watered down. It's going to be the most innocuous version of itself. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so what was your second piece of advice?
My second piece of advice, especially when you're writing memoir, is to read the entire thing out loud. Much before it goes to the printer, because the other thing that I see,
like when you say when you're in the late stages of your edit, when you're kind of, maybe it's at copy edit and there's still time to change stuff, but the book is basically stable. Would that be a good time?
I think so, because what I find time and time again is that somebody goes into the studio to read their audiobook. And side note, if you are not a celeb or somebody with a very popular podcast, you likely will not read your own audiobook. They will hire a professional narrator, and there's many reasons for that. But on the celeb side, I find that they go into the studio to read the audiobook, and they come out of that reading with pages and pages of notes. And the heartbreaking thing is if the book has already gone to the printer and we say, it's too late.
You mean you read it out loud, and then what would the notes be? You mean you think like, that line sounds really awkward. I've overwritten that. This is too long. This is, I'm okay. Right.
Yeah. Oh, I want to change this word, or that's not actually what happened, or this little thing doesn't, I wouldn't have said that. There's just little things, that come up when you are sitting there reading your book, especially a memoir, especially something that is so personal, and
especially because a lot of memoirs, they do well in audiobook format, right? Like people are listening to them, they're reading them in audio form. So you want it to come across well in that way too. I know every time I read anything that I have written aloud, I am just embarrassed by how long my sentences are. I use so many clauses, so many commas, so many dashes, so many parenthetical clauses. Like my sentences are groaning under the weight of themselves, and I cannot tell when my eyes are looking at it. I can tell, but I let myself off the hook. But when I read it aloud, I'm like, oh girl, you got to put a period in there somewhere.
Oh, I'm an M- overuser for sure. It's a struggle, but yes, and then I actually, you know what, I'm going to add a third piece of advice.
Great.
My third piece of advice is to ask yourself, if you're writing a memoir, start out and ask yourself, what do I not want to talk about? What do I not want to write about? And start there. Because
wait, you mean to go ahead and write the thing that you think you don't want to write about?
Yes.
What?
Start there, because the resistance that you have to whatever that thing is actually what is probably most interesting, and where the conflict is. And when I've worked with people who are sharing their stories, and I ask them, you know, what's one thing that you don't really want to talk about, don't really want to write about? It's invariably something difficult, and
trauma, abuse, addiction, sex, all the
And the fact of the matter is that people these days, they don't necessarily need a highlight reel of your life. They want to know about the struggle, and they want to know about the less comfortable parts. And what I have found is that many times the authors who did choose to write about what they didn't initially want to write about, it's the thing that they're most proud of in the book. So
wow, interesting.
And you can also, the final thing is that write and know that you can always take it out later. Get it on the page and know that you're going to have the final say. You're going to read this book probably 10 times, right? This is not going to be, you're not putting something in stone. So put it on the page. You can take it out later, but just try to go there, because it's going to be for the benefit of you, and not to be a broken record, but for the benefit of the reader and the world.
Oh, that is such good advice. And it's a perfect segue into, we just have time for another question or two. But I want to ask you for your insights and the advice that you have given others when it comes to sharing the work, you know, that whole experience of going public with that thing that you made. What advice do you have for people who, you know, find that challenging? I think we all find it challenging.
Yes, we all find it challenging, and I find it challenging myself. You know, I've worked as that producer behind the scenes for so long. My work as a ghostwriter requires me to literally be invisible, and I, however, am now a freelancer whose entire paycheck comes from, you know, making sure that my work can connect with people, and that I can get more clients, and that I can, you know, continue to get more projects. And so I understand it from that perspective. And I also understand it from, you know, being that guide for so many people who decided to take their story public and become someone that they hadn't been before. I think you just, you know, you need to think less about the greater world at large, and think about the young person who needs to read your book. Think about the like 16-year-old you that needs to read your book, and write it for them. And whenever there's something scary, whenever you think like, oh my God, my dad is going to read this book where I talk about having sex, or you think about, oh my God, the people online are going to, you know, roast me over the coals.
The trolls are coming for me.
The trolls are coming for you. I mean, just know that like they're going to come no matter what. And that there's never a book there's always a reason why somebody's going to be upset.
And more to the point, pulling your punches and trying to preemptively ensure that it's going to be accepted by everyone is actually going to weak out its power.
Exactly.
And drain it of its uniqueness.
And every time you think of that random judgmental person, just flip that in your mind and replace it with the image of a young person who can benefit, and write to them and tell the story to them and be public, so that, you know, that whole like, this person ran so this person walked so this person could run, you know, you have to think of that in order to kind of get over the all of the anxiety,
the fear of exposure. Yeah,
fear of exposure. I mean, know that it's normal. Know that literally nobody does not experience it. But tell yourself the things that are going to serve you instead of scrape away at you.
Great advice. Oh, Hilary, you're so full of wisdom and experience. I would love to have you. I would love to have a whole entire conversation just on memoir writing and what makes a good memoir, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe you'll come back and talk to me in depth about that, because I know that that's a topic that people really, really want to understand more. But this has been such an illuminating conversation. Tell me where folks can find you. Website, social, how do we get in your world?
Yes. So you can find me at HilarySwanson.com. That's Hilary with one L and then Swanson, SWANSON. You can find me on Instagram at Illadia, ILLADIA, where I am maybe not doing a great job of going public, and it's probably going to be mostly my toddler, but there are things that I share about ghostwriting and about the books that I've worked on there. And on my website, there is also a link to the writing workshop that I run called How the Fuck Do I Get a Book Deal? We are having, ongoing live cohorts where
great.
It'll be an intimate group, and it's interactive, and there's 7 weeks where we meet once a week, and people have then gone and branched out from there and created writing groups with the other participants, and it's just a really supportive, no bullshit kind of safe space to work out your idea, figure out your book proposal, figure out kind of what you need to do to get an agent, how to query, and how to build your platform on social media. So
amazing.
So that's where you can find me. And I look forward to connecting with more people. It's just been nice escaping from, being the gatekeeper at a big bad publisher, and now just being off on my own and just connecting directly with people and helping them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hilary.
Thank you.
I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give so much of your gift to the world that it expands you into your greatest possible version of yourself. Remember, it's not selfish just because we also benefit from it. And here's where I get to make a selfish request. New podcasts need all the help they can get. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Selfish Gift Podcast. And send me a DM. I'd love to hear how you're sharing your gift with the world.